Morning, good afternoon, good evening. There's a story in the media saying that Tendai BT is retiring from politics. He's taking a sabbatical from politics. So I can even understand what inspired this cartoon here. No doubt the image there is meant to be Tendai BT saying the shoe is bigger than I thought. And that must be Professor Walshman Ngube saying adios, chief. And that is the lady Kore, who is supposed to be the third of the three rotating presidents of Triple C. And our friend there in the back is Sengezo Savango. That I can understand. What I have to question here, which I would love to ask the cartoonists, what inspired the big boot, Chamisa shoe? I find it ridiculous, pathetic, that we still hang on to this great leader mentality to the point we do not even question what is going on. Whether we like it or not, MDC was launched in 1999. And now, nearly 24 years later, the party has accomplished nothing. They were elected. The primary purpose of electing the MDC was that they would implement the democratic reforms which will stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. We have got to keep our eyes focused on that. That was the objective, and it still is the objective. But as we know, last year Zanu PF blatantly rigged the elections. In other words, the MDC leaders have failed to implement even one token democratic reform in 24 years, including the 5 in the GNU, 2008 to 2013. Chamisa was part and parcel of that team. Indeed, he was the one who was the president of the party, the MDC alliance, after Tsvangirai's death. And we know he is the one who insisted in participating in the 2018 elections, claiming that MDC alliance has stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Of course he was lying. He wanted to participate in those elections as leader of the main opposition. He knew he didn't have a chance of winning those elections, but he wanted to emerge as the leader, the leader of Zimbabwe's main opposition party. And he did. MDC Alliance emerged out of that election as the main opposition. What ensued after that, with all the infighting within the party itself, ending up him being toppled, etc., is another matter. The fact of the matter is he had achieved that. And what we can also not deny is that he participated in those elections knowing fully well that he was lying, that Zanu PF was blatantly rigging those elections, and that participating was only going to give Zanu PF legitimacy. This we have repeated so many times. His own colleagues, the likes of David Coulthard, have admitted the same thing. I've quoted this from David Coulthard's book, and I'll quote it again here. Sorry, that one there. That is the truth. Ever since the 2013 election, the MDC leaders have been participating in these elections, knowing fully well that they are flawed, that they are illegal, and that the only logical step would be to say, no, we are not participating. But they've persisted in participating out of greed. And why we keep on insisting that Chamisa is somehow a national hero, a great leader whose boat is so big, is out of this great leader mentality. And given all the history of Chamisa's betrayal, I find that to be really ridiculous. It's hard to see how anyone can keep on promoting that foolish idea. Last year, Chamisa repeated the same thing. The Zimbabwe Daily was one of the papers that covered his claim that CCC was going to win big because he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. Is the Zimbabwe Daily establishment, does it not know that he was lying? Do they still believe that he was telling the truth? So where is this great leader mentality coming from? I would expect somebody who may be in the rural areas who really have got a problem understanding what's going on here to maintain this lie that the opposition, that Chamisa is a great leader. We have got to get out of this idiotic mentality if we are going to get out of this mess. Chamisa is not a great leader. You have got to judge him on the basis of the results. He was in the MDC since launch in 1999. What has he ever accomplished? He was at the heart of the GNU. He was one of the ministers, for Christ's sake. And that GNU failed to implement even one token democratic reform. And ever since he took over power from the late Morgan Tsvangirai, he has conned the people of Zimbabwe into participating in these flawed and illegal elections out of greed. How anyone can continue to praise somebody like that as a great leader beggars belief. Are we really that stupid that we cannot even read what is happening around us? If Zimbabwe is going to get out of this political mess, we need to elect competent opposition leaders who will implement the democratic reforms, and that stops Zanu PF rigging the elections. That is the number one priority that we have got to get done. pretending somehow that Chamisa is doing a great job and is going to get that done is naive, to say the very least. If Chamisa and company failed to implement even one token reform during the 2008 to 2013 GNU, when they had the backing of SADC, when they had the advantage of the GNU, the global political agreement, where Zanu PF had been forced to accept the need for reforms. What more now? I have to say that I am disappointed. Some of our so-called intellectuals, newspapers, they say Zimbabwe Daily is supposed to be independent, for Christ's sake. It's not the Herald or the Chronicle or one of these government-owned papers which are meant to brainwash the people. I think this is just another way of brainwashing the people. I find it ridiculous that we keep promoting this idea that somebody who has already proven that they are corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless is somehow the nation's greatest savior, wearing the big boot. I repeat, if Zimbabwe is going to get out of this economic and political mess, we need to elect the opposition leaders who will implement the democratic reforms without compromise. You have got to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections to get out of this mess. And Nelson Chamisa and company have shown again and again that they're not interested in stopping Zanu PF rigging the elections. They had the opportunity to implement reform to stop that. They failed. And ever since the GNU debacle, they participated in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. If we cannot understand what is going on here, what else do we need? What else does he have to do to show that he's corrupt and incompetent? I find it detestable that many Zimbabweans find the opposition singling individuals out and they become the fall guys of the opposition's incompetence. He's not solving the problem at all. The failures of the opposition to implement reforms, yes, must be blamed on people like Tendai Biti, Welshman Nuwe, David Coulthard, and the rest of the leadership, but including Nelson Chamisa, because he was part of that leadership that failed. To somehow single him out and so that he walks scot-free is foolish, to say the very least. And we need to stop this foolishness. I repeat, the number one task before this nation right now, the biggest challenge we are facing, is to make sure that we have got a competent opposition that will implement the democratic reforms to finally stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. At the present moment, I don't see any of these individuals doing it. I don't see Tendai Biti, Welshman Nuwe, Savango, or Nelson Chamisa doing that. And that is what we need to see. That is what we need to appreciate. Instead of having this great leader mentality that somehow Chamisa is an infallible God, same demigod who is incapable of doing anything wrong. He has already proven he is immortal, that's number one, and he has proven beyond all reasonable doubt that he is corrupt and incompetent. And this euphoria about somebody like that only goes to show that we, as a nation, we are not yet ready for a good and competent government. Because if we can praise somebody like that, then of course we get what we deserve. A failed state. I think we really need to start looking at these problems with the agency the matter demands. And to keep on going over the same failed system, same failed leaders, only goes to show that we are incapable of learning from the past. There is absolutely no excuse for pretending that the current crop of opposition leaders are going to get us out of this mess. If you don't understand what has happened these last 24 years, then one has got to say, well, will you ever understand? Will you ever understand? Zimbabwe is a failed nation. Zimbabwe is in a serious political and economic crisis. Millions of ordinary Zimbabweans are living in abject poverty in a country that, by given competent government, we really should be the South Korea of Africa. A prosperous nation, at peace with itself, and enjoying freedom and liberty. And yet here we are. The nation's assets, resources, wealth should be a blessing. And instead they've become a curse. Because the gold and diamonds and lithium are the ones that are fueling the Zanu PF corruption. And now their stay in power is assured because they are now also have got the opposition in their deep pockets. That is the only explanation why the MDC leaders have failed to implement even one reform. They are corrupt. What will it take for us to finally accept that they are corrupt? We bury our heads in the sand. It will not change the fact. The fact still remains that they are corrupt and incompetent and utterly useless. We need to take ourselves seriously if we want the world to take us serious. And at the present moment, this great leader mentality that is making us worship a corrupt and incompetent leader like Nelson Chamisa, who has proven that they are corrupt and incompetent. It's laughable. Zimbabwe is a failed state, and we need to wake up. We need to do something to put it right. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good night.